perhaps prepare ourselves for
Both Africa don't know.
so really welcome you to pay attention, and if you have any questions, just share those questions on the chat section, and we'll get to them as well. We have 4 panelists, and I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. But if you have any comments or anything that you'd like to share, please feel free to put it across on the comment section, on the chat section rather, and we'll get to it in due time. Now, to share the COVID-19 experience and basically everything else that I have outlined before, I have 4 panelists with me here. First, we have Dr. Mpoki Olisubisia, who's joining us all the way from Canada. Dr. Mpoki here is the High Commissioner of Tanzania in Canada and the former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Health, Community Development, Gender, Elderly, and Children here in Tanzania. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And he'll be sharing lots from the perspective of how the pandemic is affecting people who found themselves in foreign countries and perhaps what opportunities lie there. And we may pick a little bit more on his perspective, or rather his experience, specifically with relations to how Tanzanians are dealing with this in Canada, where he is. But the idea is to get a general understanding of how foreigners are dealing with this situation in the different parts of the world where they found themselves in. We also have on our panel, Dr. Erica Paganone, from all the way from Rome in Italy. Hi, Dr. Erica.
Hi, hello to everybody.
Welcome. Dr. Erica is a cardiologist from St. Andreas Hospital, and she'll share with us why, the experience that she's had as a doctor, and in a COVID-19 facility to offer some support over there, and what that experience has been like. So we're really looking forward to hearing that perspective of a first responder, a health worker who's on the front line in dealing with the challenge that we have. I believe by saying this, I speak for all the viewers and listeners that we have this evening. So welcome, Dr. Erica.
Thank you.
Then on the panel, we also have a student, Yang Shun, all the way from China, joining us from China. He's a student at the Adventist University of the Philippines, though he'll be joining us today as a SAFE from China. And he's representing youth who are still pursuing their education. And he'll be sharing with us how this pandemic has affected his student life, but also what opportunities that have been presented in this moment. So really look forward to hearing a lot of that from Yang Shun. And last but not least, we have Professor David Nyange. Professor David Nyange, who's joining us from Dar es Salaam here in Tanzania, is an agricultural economist and the associate professor at the Michigan State University. And he'll share more on how this pandemic is affecting the economy generally, some expectations that we should have in terms of food security and other post-COVID-19 experiences. But also he'll really share some opportunities that arise or that are open to us during this crisis to broaden our horizons and help us overcome the crisis. So welcome, Dr. David Nyange, and welcome, Mr. Yang Shun.
Thank you.
All right. So as I said before, the panelists will share the experiences and different opportunities from the different perspectives to which they come to us this evening. But also, we will have an opportunity to ask them questions. And as I said before, we'll be sharing those through the chat section of the Zoom call that we have. So if you have anything, put it there, and in due time, we will get to it, and our panelists will address as much as they can. Now, just to get right on with the session, I'd like to begin with Dr. Erica. You're a first responder, if you will, somebody who's been at the front lines of dealing with this, and you're from a country, because part of what we're doing here today is to get that global perspective from multiple countries, and you're from a country that, and especially at the very beginning, the rate of infections and cases grew up very rapidly. So people may be really curious to hear your experience in dealing with the situation. If you also
Sorry,
share with us
the
what
video
happened,
stopped.
and so how did you end up in a COVID-19 facility, and just share with us how all of that happened in the first place, and then we'll build it up from there. Dr. Erica.
Yes, thank you. I thank the organizers, first of all, for this event, for inviting me. As you all know, Italy was the first European country in which COVID-19 spread last February. Until then, we all thought that coronavirus was only China's problem, that blocking flights to and from China was enough. The first 2 cases of COVID-19 in Italy were 2 Chinese tourists in late January. But in the meantime, the Italian government declared a state of emergency and set up a task force to prevent the spread of the virus. In mid-February, we have the first case, autochthonous case of infection in Lombardy, in northern Italy. Since then, the spread of the virus in northern Italy was very rapid, and after a few days, the municipalities where outbreaks were present were isolated. But again, we thought that the problem was limited to that area, but every day, unexpectedly, it got worse. The number of infection increased, and the first deaths were counted. I remember precisely the day in which the government told us, keep a distance of 1 meter between you, avoid touching each other, holding hands, kissing, avoid meetings. And so we understood that COVID-19 was also our problem, but we still had the hope of being able to contain the infection. Even when the first cases also arrived in central Italy, where I live in Rome, 2 weeks after the first case in Lombardy, we kept looking at numbers, hoping that everything would soon be over. I remember one date, the March 1st, when a friend, a colleague cardiologist who works in a large and prestigious hospital of Milan in Lombardy, telephoned me very worried, telling me about the tragic situation in their hospital. He told me verbally, they die like flies. It is not true. This is a disease of the elderly. Even people in their 30s get sick, and even people in the 40s died like flies. I thought he exaggerated. He was a bit stressed. In the meantime, the Italian government issued decrees almost every 2 days. First, the regions of northern Italy were isolated, the so-called red areas, from which it was forbidden to leave. Schools and sports centers were closed, sports championships suspended. And after 2 days, on March 9th, a new decree established the start of the lockdown. All of Italy was considered a red zone. There were many police checkpoints to check the movements. We had an obligation to show a self-certification to demonstrate reasons for the move. That was the first time for us in Italy. There was a lot of confusion at first. So then the government clarified day after day what the bans were. In the first phase of the lockdown, the numbers continued to grow impressively, especially in northern Italy, in particular in the province of Bergamo, where government had to send the military to take away the corpses of the dead for COVID. But also the rest of Italy have had contagious, but to a much lesser extent than in the north. In some regions, the number of infection has been very low. Hospitals have had no crisis. The lockdown had been gradual, but after March 9th, for 1 month, it has been very severe. And I think that's why it was effective. After about a month, when the number of infections and deaths began to decrease, the government issued another decree. We entered the so-called phase 2, with more possibilities for moving, for outdoor activities, but in fact, not much has changed. Tomorrow, phase 3 begins in Italy. It will be mandatory to wear a facial mask everywhere and keep your distance, but many offices, shops will reopen. Many people will start taking the subway, buses and trams, and it seems that borders will also be reopened to citizens of the European Union, and hopefully well.
That's a very interesting experience, and I really love how you've given us sort of a timeline of how it's progressed over time. Now, just before I also ask Mr. Young to also share with us his experience, maybe just tell us a little bit more on, as a cardiologist, what happened that you ended up in a COVID-19 facility.
Yeah. So the first positive COVID patients arrived in my hospital on March 4th in intensive care unit, and in a few days the hospital has changed from that moment. Many departments have been closed. A completely isolated infectious disease department was opened. 2 intensive care units were completely dedicated to COVID. And after a few weeks, it was necessary to open 2 other COVID intensive care units, but also other departments for different intensity of care, where were to hospitalize COVID positive patients, so we did not need mechanical ventilation. Then the hospital organized units of 3 different levels of care of intensity. Intensive care, the sub-intensive care, and the low-intensity care department for low-intensity care. Our cardiologist has been almost empty for several weeks. So when the low-intensity care units of COVID were open, various doctors for clinical disciplines, were asked to work in the COVID departments. In particular, some internal medicine and specialist departments were closed to make room for the COVID units. So doctors were diverted to the COVID units. Okay. But we cardiologists were employed on a voluntary basis.
Okay. That's very interesting. I mean, I believe our viewers and listeners are beginning to see how the pandemic really took over the situation, and really all resources in terms of manpower, in terms of even facilities, had to sort of be redirected into that. Thank you very much, Dr. Erica, for sharing that situation. Now, Mr. Young, Dr. Erica has told us that when this whole situation started, there was a feeling at some point that, okay, maybe this is not going to come to our side. Maybe this is just something that maybe would end up in China. Obviously, now it's grown to become a global situation. You are a Chinese student who goes to this university in the Philippines. When this happened, maybe share with us, where were you at that point, and maybe what were your initial expectations on how it would spread and what its effects would be?
Okay, for me, when the outbreak began, I was in China in my vacation, and I was planned to go back to my school in Philippines. But when the first time, I didn't take it really serious, because I think it's just a common virus, like a common cold, and the technology in China is fast today. I think the scientists, the doctors will create the vaccine soon. So I didn't take it really serious. When I first time take it serious, it's since from my plane ticket has been rejected because of the virus. Yeah. And my plane ticket has been rejected by 5 times in 1 month. So at that time, everyone has been quarantined. And at the same time, Wuhan city, where the virus began in China, Wuhan city has been locked down. So everyone in China from that time is really take it serious. It's a serious virus things, and everybody's staying home.
Okay, okay, interesting. Interesting. Maybe share a little bit more with us. Okay, so obviously it's interesting to know that because sometimes and I really like how you've shared the fact that it began to become real to you the moment when your plane ticket was rejected, and for some people it may not have been so real to them until something close to them happened. And would just really like to hear a little bit more on how it's affected you as a student. Maybe what really has been affected in your regular routine and responsibilities.
Okay. As a student, this virus has really a big infected for student, because at the first the education is different, right? Before we have a face-to-face education, but now especially for the international student, and especially for Chinese international student, because I don't know if some of you guys came to China before, you will know that Google Forms, Google Apps, is not allowed using China. So it's hard to connect to communicate with teachers. Use Google, because we use Google Classroom and Messenger, Facebook to talk to teacher. So, and it's also hard to us. The education has been changed, and also my life has been changed because in China, because in my school, everybody around me is my classmate and my friends. We are all studying every day, and we study together, that I can get an energy that go hard with them. But for me, it's hard to hustle just by myself. So I became more lazy and fatter, no more exercise, no more study except the requirements. And also, I think for everybody, it's the same things. My plan for this year has been destroyed. I think for me, I'm the person who have a to-do list for years, for month, for day, and I have a target for this year, but because of the virus, it has been destroyed. So it's really changed my life in a lot of ways. It's a bad effective, actually.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I believe, like you said, for many of us, that has been a challenge. For those of you who are joining us right now, we're on a session where we're talking about the experience of COVID-19, and we're looking at it from multiple perspectives, from in terms of nations, in terms of roles in society. And we have 4 panelists with us. We have the High Commissioner of Tanzania to Canada, Dr. Mpoki. We have Yuan Shun, who's a student. We have Dr. Erica Paganone, who's first responder from Italy. And we have Dr. Nyange, who's a professor with Michigan State University, based here, but he's also based here in Dar es Salaam. And we're not just talking about the experience in terms of painting the grim picture, but we're also trying to look at what opportunities there are, what hope there is in the midst of what we have. Now, Yuan has shared with us his experience in terms of where COVID-19 found him. Obviously, it wasn't usually he'd spend so much of his time in his university in the Philippines, but this actually found him in China, and now he's not able to go back to the Philippines to his university.
Yes.
There's some people that have sort of faced the same thing, whereas they found themselves in a country that's not of their origin. They found themselves in a country that they would call foreign. Now, maybe Dr. Mpoki can share with us, from your experience as the High Commissioner in Canada, the foreigners there, how are they accommodated in the Canadian health system? And maybe specifically to Tanzanians, how is the Tanzanian mission communicating with the Tanzanian community there to kind of find the impact that COVID-19 has had to them.
Thank you very much, Fortune. I'm delighted to be able to communicate with so many of you so far away from home. For those of you who are grappling with distances, this is over 12,000 kilometers away. That's how far this place is from Tanzania. Now, many people come to Canada for many reasons. Before any person is admitted into this country, there are certain conditions that must be met and fulfilled before a visa is given. One of them has to do with how are they going to take care of their healthy needs. And so naturally, this country has a health system that is paid for. So that like there's no free health service. It's not like the Scandinavian countries where people are taxed and that tax pays for the healthcare services. And so each person coming to this country must have an insurance with one or the other company. It is only by carrying a valid insurance identification that an individual is taken care of their health needs. However, emergencies have a waiver that people go to hospital, life-threatening emergencies are taken care of, and then during the recovery now, the long period after the person is stable, then they'll start asking on who's going to foot the bill. So life is, the life-threatening conditions are handled first, and then the chronic part of the ailment that has to be paid in. Now, all Tanzanians that are in Canada have one or the other form of insurance. Now, Canada is a very big place. Canada is the second largest country in the world. By comparison, Tanzania is 1/10 of the size of Canada. Because if Tanzania is 930-something thousand square kilometers, Canada is 9,985,000 square kilometers, second only to Russia. There are 10 provinces and 3 territories. In each of these provinces and each of the territories, we have a presence of one or several Tanzanians. So each Tanzanian coming to Canada, either they come on their own volition or they are sponsored by the government, is required by law to register with the Chancery, that is the mission. Now, traveling from Toronto to Ottawa, where the High Commission is seated, which is the seat of the government, takes about 4 to 5 hours. So it's very expensive. So Bola is like flying from Abuja to Dar es Salaam. It's that far. So we are seeing a number of some students coming to register, yet others are still buying their time. But a majority of the students or people that immigrated, that came to Canada for work or for studies, came to the High Commission or to the mission, Tanzanian mission in Ottawa, when an announcement was made that of phasing out the older machine-readable passports and replacing them with the e-passports. That's when we saw the largest. So when they came, we had an opportunity of meeting them one-on-one and then getting the details of where they were located and what they were doing where possible. Now, these are the people that required the passports. But remember, there are people that moved to Canada a long time ago. Some of them became Canadian citizens, and others did not come to have their passports changed in through the immigration systems that we have in the Chancery, but they had traveled home, so they had their passports. So there's a little bit of inaccuracy in the numbers of people that we have. But there is an open channel of communication through telephones, cell phones, emails, and the social media. So any person in need of anything writes an email or places a phone call. And there's always a receptionist to pick their calls, and people are guided in that way, and they comply. Now, with this crisis, there was a time that we used to go to work. This is up to and including March 21st. But after that time, when there was total lockdown in Canada, then individuals that require services from the Chancery depended on emails and naturally the cell phones for the employees that will offer services in the chancery. So that is a situation. Health, top class, world class, but paid for. How we communicate, we either solicit information or they solicit guidance from our mission staff that are based in Ottawa. But the laws about the disease that the public health specialists enforced in Canada cut across the board. None is exempt, including the Right Honorable Prime Minister himself. And I think it's common knowledge that the wife traveled to Europe and she contacted the virus. So she had to be isolated for a certain number of days, the husband too. So he used to work from the house. And this is the 8th week counting that we've not gone to the office for regular work. The only people that go to work are those that are on the front line. And the burden is different in different cities. Some are hit harder than others, but generally speaking, it's now that we are seeing some ray of hope where there's going to be some relaxation of this strict and stringent regulations to control person-to-person transmission. Before I let somebody else speak, the social control has been enforced so seriously that 2 weeks ago, some young people, having stayed in the house for 6 weeks, got tired. They decided to go out and play ball, American football. The neighbors alerted the police. The police came, arrested them, and each paid 800 Canadian dollars as fine for infringing the social distancing that had been enforced. This has proved that when people do not interact the way they used to, diseases remain with those who have the virus. And so a large numbers of people are prevented from being infected. Washing of hands with soap and running water, the use of sanitizers, the protection of droplets from one person's respiratory system to the other through a wearing of face masks has shown to have a serious impact in mitigating for this disease. And so we are seeing numbers now falling. The deaths are still on the higher side, but new infections are less as compared to March and April when the disease was at its peak. And we are learning lessons from China, Wuhan, we're learning lessons from France, we're learning lessons from Italy, and all these brought together, we get the best, and this is what is making this society to be much more healthier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpoki, for that well explained experience that you have shared. And I'm really impressed by how the embassy has extended its reach out to people, but also kept lines open just so that people who are there, because I mean, from everything we're hearing here now, is that the situation isn't it's dire. So in a situation like that, it's really important to have lines open so that those who really feel like they need to reach out, they don't struggle to do that. And especially in a place where, as you've explained, it's a large country. So some people may find themselves in a very distant area, but as long as that line of communication is there, there's at least some hope that they would get support. Thank you very much for sharing that. One thing that stood out to me from what you said was the fact that the Canadian healthcare is to be paid for through some form of insurance, mostly, and that brings me to think about the economic impact that COVID-19 has had generally on people. Now, Dr. Nyange, who's with us, can I just hear, just confirm if Dr. Nyange is with us? Hello, Dr. Nyange.
His mic is muted, so he has to unmute his mic. Yeah, now it's fine. He can talk now.
Hello, Dr. Nyange.
Hello.
Yes, glad to hear from you. Welcome to today's session.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so Dr. Mpoki was just explaining to us here the situation in Canada, which I believe maybe representative of the situation in so many countries where foreigners are trying to deal with COVID-19 in a country that's really not of their origin. And one of the things he highlighted was how the healthcare there requires everything to be paid for. It's something that brings me to think about the economic impact of COVID-19. And maybe you may be, based on your work, be in a good position to share with us just an overview, a bird eye view of the economic impact of this pandemic. And then maybe also a little bit on if there are any enterprises that stand some opportunities or have access to any new opportunities because of this pandemic. Would really be glad to hear that. Welcome, Dr. Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fortune. First of all, apologies. My connectivity has been in and out because of the location, but I think now we can communicate. I would say, as you are aware, COVID-19 is not only a health crisis, but is also an economic crisis. Africa has been lagging behind in terms of the spread of the pandemic, but is catching up fast. As you have heard already, there are already over 81,500 victims of the pandemic and over 2,700 deaths in the continent. And understanding the weak health system, I believe the number might be higher. But thanks, Lord, I would say Africa has been falling behind the curve compared with other continents. However, Africa is likely to be much bigger impacted through the economy. As you are aware, some industries have been very much adversely affected. For example, tourism. As you know, the current condition is not conducive for tourism. Tanzania, for instance, has been receiving over 1 million tourists a year. And now the arrivals are almost zero. And here you are talking about individuals with high income, with big purchasing power. So this is a huge market that has been lost, first along the value chain itself, from the airlines to the tour operators, to hotels, food services. So many people have lost jobs in this sector, but also in other service-related sectors. But also the panic that this pandemic has created has made consumers also to save more rather than consume. And this is having a negative multiplier effect. As you could see, quite a large number of businesses are closing down, and even those which are open are struggling. And this will have even an implication when it comes to government revenue. There have been a number of reports which are out there showing how this pandemic will affect the economy. In fact, it's going to cause a global crisis, a global economic crisis with recession in some countries. And it's going to slow down the whole economic growth. We see the lives of people completely change. One important point to be aware of is in Africa, the informal sector is the major sector. In fact, in Tanzania, for instance, the formal sector is only 15%. So the rest of the economy is informal, which means people have to go out and earn their income on a daily basis. If it's a motorcycle driver, a taxi driver, has to go out, get 1 or 2 passengers, before they could buy food and have their meals in a day. So someone has to go out, before they can be able to make the ends meet. And that becomes a big challenge. I can also highlight some of the factors that make Tanzania and other African countries vulnerable, but also talk about factors that make our economies also to some extent resilient. The first one, vulnerability, is prevalence of other diseases. For example, HIV/AIDS. I think in Tanzania, Dr. Mpoki will correct me. I know the last figure were around 7%. I know there have been a further decline in terms of prevalence of HIV/AIDS. And we know people who are most vulnerable to this disease are people who have other diseases. We also have malaria, but we also have non-communicable diseases that are rising fast. Just came across some statistics recently showing the prevalence, for example, of diabetes in Tanzania, which is almost 10% as compared to the global average of 80%. So all these are making people more vulnerable. Another factor, of course, is overstretched health systems. If you look at the number of doctors per total number of people, you can find that Tanzania and Africa in general have very few healthy specialists. So these make us more vulnerable. Another factor is demographic. If you look at the family size, for example, in Tanzania, a household has an average of 5 persons. And that poses some challenges when it comes to social distancing and self-isolation. This is far different from the US, which is around 2.5 to 3 persons per household. Yeah. Another factor, of course, is that culture-wise, Africa tends to be more social. People interact a lot. And that becomes social distancing a challenge. However, we do also have some factors which make Africa resilient. One factor is that Africa, having gone through all these health crises for malaria, HIV/AIDS, Ebola, and others, there's a network of organizations, public and non-public, including NGOs out there in the field with experienced staff. Which means if, let's say, if a vaccine will be available, it might be easier to distribute and administer it across the population because of the network of these organizations that already exist in the system. Another factor is that the average age of population is much lower in Africa. In fact, the median age in Africa is 20 years. For Tanzania, in fact, is around 18 years, as compared to Asia, which is 30 years, and 40 years in Europe. And we know this disease is affecting more aged people. So that gives Africa a bit of resilience. Now, economically, I will talk more about Tanzania. I would say one factor which make our economy a bit resilient is that despite that some sectors such as tourism have been very badly hit, but our economy is quite diverse. We have agriculture, we have manufacturing, that is still, but it's there. We have mining, we have transport, we have construction, and the distribution of the economy, if you look at the GDP share for these various sectors, it's almost evenly distributed. Unlike many countries which are depending on one commodity, for example, oil. And as you know, the price of oil has really crashed. So this gives some countries such as Tanzania a bit of resilience economically. Also, when you look at the cost of, the tax structure, you find it's also diversified, VAT, import tariff, and others. So that gives Tanzania a bit of resilience. But also when it comes to food self-sufficiency, as you already heard, the World Food Program declaring a hunger pandemic that will be associated with COVID-19, where millions of people are likely to suffer serious hunger this year, with a projection that probably 300,000 people might die per day. Tanzania were very well endowed, and in the last 20 years we've been experiencing, food self-sufficiency with a surplus. So I would say, despite all these challenges, there are also some opportunities which we can make use of. For example, if we can produce enough and surplus to sell to countries around us which are badly in need of food, that could be an opportunity for us.
So Dr. Jag, just before we get into the opportunities, there's something that you've highlighted and you quite emboldened it at the beginning of your comments on the issue of unemployment and how how it's been a result of some sectors struggling. You know, you highlighted how tourism, for example, in Tanzania would bring in about 1 million tourists, but right now it's just about zero. Almost no one is coming in for tourism. And I'm just going to get back to you on the opportunities in a short moment. But I wanted just to tie that together with some experience. If I'm going to call on onto Dr. Mpoki to share with us how unemployment is affecting foreigners. You know, if you're in a country that's not of your origin and you're there perhaps for work, but right now because the pandemic has affected your industry or perhaps your company and you have to be laid out. How does that look like for foreigners in Canada, for example, where Dr. Mpoki, you're based, and maybe specifically for Tanzanians? How does that, how big is that challenge, first of all, and then perhaps what are the other issues at play in terms of legal ensuing matters that may affect or may have a role in making the situation worse, or perhaps what opportunities such people have being in a country of not of their origin and unexpectedly out of a job. Dr. Mpoki.
One of the things that I can say with confidence is I don't know what those people are doing. But what I know for sure is that the retail industry is way down, distribution way down, so logistics, supply chain, except on those commodities that are very, very essential. So the government has put in some stimulus package, amount of money that people are paid. Okay. Those whose employments have been affected adversely by the virus. Okay. I am not sure if the stimulus package that is given by government reaches out to the non-Canadian individuals. But I know if an establishment is given money for the business that is not being run, then maybe a portion of it will be paid to those that are not working now, because it's not a mistake of their own. Right. But one of the things that we are seeing, like across the border in the US, citizens have been given some money, $1,200, to help them fund their lives with during this period. But citizens who are not of countries such as these ones, it's a big question. It's not easy. If they never saved enough, well, the challenges. Now, usually companies that made arrangements for these individuals to come and work for them in this country will usually provide some mitigation to help them survive this duration. But individuals that came and they were fending for themselves, like casual laborers, that's bad news. It is bad news. Each one of them is fending for themselves. And over the weekend, like on Sabbaths, we meet in church together virtually, but life is rough. Unfortunately, our governments have not been part to the exportation of the labor force. So our governments cannot really be called upon to foot for the bill of these individuals that found greener pastures elsewhere that now are in trouble. Compassionately, we simply organize for those that want to be repatriated back home. That arrangement can be made, but again, it has to be paid for. And who pays it? The same individual that wants to be taken home. But the audience would agree with me that going home is more tolerable on a loan than staying in a foreign country on a loan, not knowing when you'll be able to raise money to pay back for that loan. And in countries like this, there's nothing like an uncle that you can go and borrow money to survive on. The only institution that lends money in these countries is the bank. So if you are not qualified to borrow money from a bank, you know what that means. Students who usually come are usually given a permit to work part-time. Now, those that were caught after the borders were closed, they are quite struggling. And all we are doing is moral, and we are grateful for the parents who are able to support their sons and daughters so far away from home during this tough period. Unfortunately, even those who decide to come back home cannot do so because there are no direct flights from this place to East Africa, so to say. And I'm saying East Africa because, you know, the major hubs are known. And so that is a situation. But with little money, you can make ends meet by rationing your meals. Maybe instead of taking 3 square meals, you take 1 square plus a quarter. It is possible. You're not going to die. And that could even help you shed off some of the unwanted calories that led to a much round appearance as compared to a lean one. And maybe it could be a good thing for you, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
It is definitely a difficult experience and interesting perspective that you have on the calories, but it is definitely a challenging experience. Let me go to Mr. Yang for a moment here. I mean, we've seen how people have been forced to stay at home now. People who were working, just like the situation we were just discussing with Professor Nyangi and Dr. Mpoki, but also students like yourself who also have to stay at home during these times because either they couldn't travel or because the universities aren't, or they're learning from home in situations like that. Now, I'm just curious if there is any other opportunities, let's say learning in terms of building certain skills or abilities that people could spend some time doing, or perhaps you, specifically for you, you've been able to gather during the lockdown, and we may begin to look at that now as, you know, hope or perhaps opportunities that are there or open to people during challenging times as this. Mr. Yang.
You mean the online education?
Sorry?
Sorry, what do you mean the online education?
Yeah, so not yeah, so maybe that could be one of them, but using maybe online education, but also using any other means that you may have, perhaps what skills or abilities that you've been able to gather. Because I really want our viewers and listeners to also have an idea that we've just been talking about how some people have been laid off of work because of this situation. But I believe there are opportunities, or there are things that people could learn and still forge your way in the midst of this. And I just want to build that maybe from your experience, if you've been able to gather some skills or learn new skills during this pandemic.
Okay, yes. Okay. So during the lockdown, actually at the beginning, I was lazy to learn something new because I think everybody is afraid of the virus, and we are hoping that the virus can stop. But since situation now, it's not really possible the virus will stop us just soon. So as you said, this is like an opportunity for someone. So I think there's something that we can learn except the online class. Maybe like before, I like to learn languages. So maybe I have time to learn some language that before I want to learn, but I don't have time before. But now we have a lot of time. Like Korean, I'm a Korean beginner actually. I'm trying to learn that, and also some skill, instruments, piano, guitars, all of that. That this is really, like you said, it's an opportunity for learn, because this time we're doing nothing, just lockdown quarantine in home. So
Interesting. By the way, just while we're still on that, I understand that now, since you can't go back to Philippines, you're having to do this online school specifically for your university courses. How is that working out?
The online education?
Yeah, the online learning that you have to do for your college courses. How's that
Uh,
working out? Yeah.
okay. So the online education, okay. Online education for me, there's of course online education have a lot of cons that we can face to each other. So that maybe sometimes I got some problem with teachers, and it's hard to discuss. It's hard to talk with them, and also that without facing each other, the learning for me it's lost a lot of fun for study. Like before, we have a PE, we have a maybe you can run on class badminton, basketball, but now we can push up by ourselves in a home. So it's lost a lot of fun. It's just like scientists, we have a group, we can work together, we can do something together. But now we can. Maybe we can through the group chat, we can through the messenger, but it's also lost a lot of fun. But I think, of course, there's a lot of cons for online education, cons, but the pros is absolutely clearly that for special time, for special situation, we can only use this special way to figure it out because the virus is out there and we can't face to each other. So the online education became the best way for now, I think.
Interesting. It's interesting to me because there's two sides to this situation that we're talking about here. Because on one case, you have opportunities online to learn of new skills, and I believe that's really one of the things people can turn to if you're looking for to find something to do during this time, or maybe even a way to survive. What can you offer online and things like that. But then the other side that you've brought up, which I want to use it to build into the next part, is the challenge really that online brings, because we're social beings. I mean, human beings are social beings, and a lot of what we do in terms of learning, even in terms of working, is social. And the pandemic has really taken that away from us, even though we have online alternatives, but it has taken that physical, social part away from us. And there's several people who are struggling with that, and it has what I would call psychological, perhaps even to use a specific term, mental challenges that people are having to face now because of that. And I'd like to move this now to Dr. Erica, being a doctor. And actually, I want to bring this to you in two ways. One, I understand as a frontline worker, as a first responder, you're having to spend a lot of hours dealing with these challenges, and in doing so, you're being deprived perhaps of time that you would have otherwise spent with family or friends. And how are you dealing with that? And then perhaps just share with us, your perspective being a doctor. I know you're a cardiologist, but doctors are always doctors. How people are dealing with this, the mental part, the psychological effects of social distancing, or rather physical distancing, that we have to do.
Just a moment.
Erica, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, for those of you who are joining us right now, while Dr. Erica is working on that, we're talking about.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Erica. Your mic is on mute.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, being a doctor has affected my family life a lot. Among other things, my husband is also a doctor, engaged in the front row in the care of COVID, even more than me, because he works in a military hospital, which is currently all intended for the care of COVID patients. I have a 6-year-old daughter who, when the school closed on March 4th, I brought to another region, 200 kilometers from Rome, to my mother to stay with her grandmother. The same evening I came back to Rome, the president announced the lockdown. My daughter was actually stuck there, and above all, I needed to live at my mother's because I had to work. I couldn't bring her back because my mother is 70 years old, and she was afraid of living at home with me. And I come and go from the hospital. She had fear of contagion. I haven't seen my daughter for a month and a half, and I took a vacation. Then, after working in the COVID unit, I took a vacation, a parental leave. In this sense, the government has given many facilities to the medical staff with young children, have given us the possibility of 50% paid parental leave. So I was able to go to Abruzzo, my region of origin. I was able to move with the self-certification to see my daughter for 15 days. And now again, I haven't seen her for a month. Now I will be able to take advantage for a babysitter bonus for doctors and paramedics, a bonus of 1,000 euro, I hope, to be spent until December, because the schools will certainly not reopen until September. Certainly what I suffered the most was the distance for my daughter, but above all, the sorrow for the closure of the school. And I happened to reflect a lot on the importance of school, on what it means to live in countries where education for children is not guaranteed. It's a real torture. And my daughter herself was probably more sorry for the closure of school than for the distance from her mother.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and definitely it is a challenge that first responders are having to face. I just want to, I believe I speak on behalf of our viewers and listeners when I say we appreciate the job that you're having to do, and even more so because both you and your husband are on the front line. So it must be very difficult for the family, but sometimes some of us are called to serve, and I believe that's a noble call. So be blessed very much for what you're doing there. Now, maybe if I can just pull you back just a little bit more on the psychological impact, not just to the health workers, but just generally in the population, because of the isolation that we're having. I remember earlier on when the pandemic was starting, and I think when you were in the first phase of the lockdown, when it was the very strong, stringent lockdown, we saw videos of people in Italy singing from their apartment balconies together, and it was really hope, and it was cheering, and it was kind of just reminding us of how human beings are social, and how we need that. And now we're missing that because of this physical and social distancing that we have to do. Maybe what are the challenges there, and maybe as we transition into now talking about the opportunities we have, what can we do to kind of like keep sense of that? And I know in the future we'll have a webinar that will focus mainly on that, but maybe just highlight us into what opportunities are there for us to deal with those psychological and mental challenges that we have because of the isolation that we have to deal with.
Those videos you saw of people singing on the balcony was only in the first phase of, or perhaps the first week of lockdown. Then people stopped to sing and became worried. I think that I a bit severe because I think it was very hard for everyone, but especially for children, because children cannot understand the situation. But I think also that we in Italy are, thanks to God, do not know how war is. This is the first emergency from 70 years when the last war ended. But I think the lockdown was absolutely necessary. So we as parents, as adult people, had the should find should have to be strong for our sons, for our children.
Definitely. Really being there for each other, I think it's very important. Even though we really have to do the social distancing to deal with this situation, but we still. Somebody usually said this. Somebody once said this to me, and I don't really want to dig deeper into it, but I thought it was an interesting statement. It said that what we're supposed to do is physical distancing, not social distancing. But yeah, it's really important to be there for each other. I want to bring this back to Dr. Mpoki because when you in the last question and the last points you were making when you were talking about how foreigners are dealing with unemployment and just really how difficult, as you say, for example, with Canada, it's a very large country, people may be far away. And I'm just thinking of those people and how they're having to deal with isolation, being far from their families. And some of them, I know some of my friends who've lost some of their family members, but they can't travel to go there because it's in a different country. Travel is really limited right now, if there at all. How do you suppose this, just these people are dealing with this psychologically, and perhaps what opportunities or hope do you think they have, if any?
Well, I could put forward one proposal. The only hope there is JESUS, period.
Okay.
And that is capital bold underlined. A member of my staff lost their dad last week. Sadly, to the current viral infection. The best we did was go, mourn with them, pray with them, and help them remember there is a hope beyond the pandemic. The beauty about this problem is that it's not discriminated, that only a certain group of people are affected. This pandemic has affected everybody. So the mitigation towards this pandemic is the same across the board. For the first time in so many years, what Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes makes a lot of sense. Everything is vanity. It doesn't matter how much money you've got, because there are people who have died leaving a lot of money behind. There are people who are very poor that were walking the streets, they dropped down and died. When we are confronted with a challenge like we are at the moment, there is hope in togetherness. And in Africa, we subscribe very well to the Ubuntu spirit. You are because I am. Your problem is my problem. I cannot see you suffering and say it's your problem. That is why our brothers and sisters from Cuba went to Italy when the disease was at its peak. Because they were addressing a common human need. Distances can be punishing. But once a person has accepted the fact that it's a factor that they cannot control, they cannot manipulate, you tend to find a way of living around it. My brother Titus Osundina has said, lockdown has taught us that in the house you can do sports, you can work, and you can bond. In the house, because of the lockdown. I just responded on the chat box by telling him, actually, I am not sure if offices will be relevant anymore, because we've been able to work from home and delivering on what our employers have desired to get from us. So we are learning, but the learning curve is very steep, and thank God we share the results. What Erika has told us about the social distancing between herself and the family is not just limited to Italy. If you were to go to Muhimbili, my colleagues, brothers and sisters working from that place would think twice before they simply went home and start handling their children. You've seen on the web parents going home not being able to touch their children. So they go to a glass panel door and they wave, and the baby comes ready to hug them just to be blocked by the glass panel. That is a situation that human race is faced with in the world today. And that is why the solution to this problem must be owned by the human race, not one nation, not one individual, but all of us. And so even when the pressure is this hard, with Jesus in the vessel, we can face the storm.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpogi, for those powerful insights there. And I really love how you've talked about the human race and how this should be owned by a human race, because it is a challenge faced by the human race in its entirety. And really, that's part of why we're having this call, and we have people from different parts of the world to just really understand that experience from those multiple perspectives and to see if we can learn something from each other. My big takeaways from what Dr. Erica has said and what you've also said is first, we've got to be there for each other in terms like this. We've also got to really look up to Jesus, because even when you're alone, he's still there with you. And we also need to just accept the challenge that we have and then have new perspectives and change the way we think or expectations of things. And that will also help in dealing with the isolation and that we had to endure during these times. Something else that comes to mind in terms of opportunities that arise, or rather opportunities for us to do something about the situation that we're in, the pandemic that we have, is in building our immunity, in living healthier. Because as Dr. Nyange may have highlighted before, and I think Dr. Erica, if I remember that correctly, is that there is probably more opportunities for those who are who do not have pre-existing. I mean, it's a little bit less tough, the virus that is, on those who perhaps have less pre-existing conditions and stronger immunity. And I'm thinking that what is the role for this in terms of healthy eating and things like this? And I want to bring this to Dr. Nyange, because he works in the area of agriculture and food security, and I want him to highlight on that and then maybe Dr. Nyange, as you answer that, also begin to take us on what other opportunities. I remember earlier on I cut you short, but we're beginning to talk about opportunities we have in terms of food production. So maybe shed some light on that as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Fortune. And I would like also to pick up from where Dr. Mpaki has left, from the faith and biblical point of view, that in every temptation, the Lord also would open the door for us. And of course, for a common man would say, in every cloud there's a silver lining, showing that challenges can also open up new opportunities. And the world has gone through a cycle of crisis in the past, and one lesson which we draw is that always after going through the crisis, you do have a period of rapid growth. And this is because as individuals and businesses are trying to adapt to the new situation, they tend to invest a lot in innovation, which would result, in innovative approaches which are more efficient, and that could have, a multiplier effect in terms of economic growth. So even currently with the crisis, there are industries that are mushrooming. For example, in telecom, because of media such as the one that we are using now, use of data has really increased many times, by many times, which means the telecom companies are also making big businesses this time despite the crisis, and they are investing a lot to expand the system in order to cope up with increased demand and the capacity. As I mentioned earlier, that the food supply chains, some of them are already disrupted, particularly in the global trade, and that can open up an opportunity for regional and the local supply chains, to supply the necessary food stuff as a substitute, to imports that used to be imported, which are currently disrupted by the supply chains. Even within agriculture, you have certain products that have high demand. I think you read a lot in the media about, for example, onion, whose price has skyrocketed. And of course, also for spices, as people are trying to look, for ways, to relieve themselves from the impact of COVID-19. So if you're unemployed, it's always good to think, what other skills do you possess? And this brings us back, to the Bible, the story of Noah, as he was speaking with God, and he was trying to solve a problem, and when he was asked, what do you have in your hand? So you have to start with what you have. So we may possess certain skills that can help us be able to adapt to the current situation and make use of that to provide an alternative employment for us. Agriculture has a capacity, especially in our countries, to absorb a lot of people who are currently being laid off in the tourism sector. But this time also, one can use it, to expand your knowledge and academic qualifications. I've seen, for example, Harvard offering for free certain courses, free of charge. These are courses that many people cannot afford. Now you can register freely and pursue certain courses and get a certificate. So there are opportunities out there which we can make use of. I'm not saying that the situation will be the same. Definitely, everyone is struggling, but it does not mean that we are hopeless. There's another door that is opening up for us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyangi, for sharing. In the initial, you really did a great job of shedding the light on.
Otun, can I make a comment, please?
On how the situation is with that regard. But also, you've also brought us into an overview of the opportunities that they're there, because like we said earlier, we don't just want to paint a green picture. We want us to paint the real picture. And I believe the real picture includes understanding how challenging the situation is, but also how we can actually, what we can do, what hope there is for us in this situation. I believe we've been getting lots of questions and I've been reviewing them. I just want you to know this is for listeners that I've been actually going through the questions and trying to weave them in as we've been talking to our panelists. And yes,
I just need to make one comment.
Sure.
The role of nutrition, COVID-19. It is common knowledge that a body that is not endowed with good immunity stands a very high chance of being infected, not only with the new coronavirus, but many other infections. So it goes without saying that if we are to keep from being infected, then we need to be careful on what we eat. Our diets must be balanced, because if we are malnourished, we shall suffer from so many other diseases. Now, the malnourishment that I'm talking about here results from undernutrition. In other words, when we eat less than what our body requires, or overnutrition when we consume more than what our body requires. We need to balance the intake of balanced diets. Fruits, vegetables, carbohydrates, some fat, proteins must be balanced for our bodies to function normally, for the immune system to work well. Children that suffer from protein malnutrition tend to be at risk of so many other diseases, and the mothers that have had the unfortunate experience of caring for such would agree with me that one of the things that their children are given as medication is anti-tuberculosis medication. Because it's common that when your body immune system is not working properly, then many other infections will settle in. So I wanted to stress on that one. Again, There's been a lot of question on the role of traditional portions in the managing this illness. What I have written is what I want to say. Erica and I would want to say no studies have been done around the world, including China, that have given us a formula that when it's taken 3 times in a day, it will bring healing. This does not mean such formula does not exist. All we are saying from our perspective of scientific positioning, we need evidence that shows so many patients we are given this portion so many times a day for a certain duration. After that duration, so many were healed. Just like it's done when new medications are discovered, like penicillin was discovered, it was known that when it's taken, bacteria that went into the body were killed. And so if you are looking for an answer, like with evidence that has been proven by the World Health Organization, we are not there yet. So I'd rather we do not spend time arguing for or against garlic, ginger. Those that seem to work from your traditional setting, God bless you. But as our position, we cannot say you come and I'll prescribe that, okay, you take so many cloves and all these kind of things. I just wanted to make that very clear at this level, including steam inhalation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpoki. First of all, for stressing the nutrition part as a way to build immunity. I would also call on to Dr. Erica to also maybe add a little bit on that, as well as also on that, because I think you've done a really job of explaining the issue of natural remedies and how it plays into what we have. The fact that we really don't have a specific formula of that has been scientifically proven that can be prescribed to people, and it's very important to keep that in mind. Even though people would tend to use this and that based on what they believe works, but there we're not yet there. So maybe Dr. Erica, you may want to shed a little bit, just very briefly, on those two things: nutrition as well as the remedies.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Diet is important, and some of us doctors recommend the consumption of vitamins C and D. They themselves take them. Doctors who are working with COVID patients, of course. Sorry, Fortune. About your previous question about social. Your previous question, I probably didn't suffer social distancing as much, probably because I saw what the consequences of the COVID were. So I consider it an absolutely necessary sacrifice. We are a rich country. Italy is a rich country with many possibilities. We had to make some sacrifices, but our supermarkets were always full. We had not suffered from hunger. Okay, so online lessons were also guaranteed. Graduation sessions were held regularly. I participated as a co-supervisor to a graduation session. In short, the real problem was who contracted the COVID, who died, who lost their job. Our prime minister's messages have always been very encouraging, like everything will be fine, but he always specified.
I lost you.
Yeah, the sound. I'm not sure what happened. Dr. Erica, we cannot hear you, son, but I'll circle back to you in a moment as we're summing up. I'm really glad that we're having a really good response in terms of viewers and listeners. We've been talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, sharing experiences from different parts of the world, from different roles in society. We have Dr. Mpoki, who's a High Commissioner for Tanzania to Canada. We have Mr. Yang Shun, who is a student, Dr. Erica Paganon, who is a first responder doctor based in Rome, Italy. Mr. Yang is in China, studies in the Philippines. We have Dr. David Nyange, who is a professor with Michigan State University. He's based in Dar es Salaam. He's an expert in agriculture, food security, the economy. He's been sharing a lot of insights on that, as well as with regards to COVID-19 impact in Africa. And we've really talked about various opportunities that are there, even in the challenge that we're facing. First, we've talked about really the very, and I really like how this conversation has all come to the need for us to build immunity through diet, because that's very important. And in the future, I believe we're definitely going to have another webinar that talks about immunity and really the role of diet in building that immunity so that we can withstand the challenges that are posed with the virus and maybe other issues as well. We also talked about mental health and how it's being affected, even though we know, and as Dr. Erica has really emphasized, that social distancing is necessary at this point, and that's very true. And the question that is now left to us is, how do we deal with the mental health challenges that people face in this social distancing? And we talked about the need to always be in touch, even as with social distance, to not really leave the humanity part out of it. But we also talked about having a new perspective. We've talked about looking up to Jesus as a friend who's always there, even as with social distance, we really can social distance from him. And we've also highlighted some other opportunities in terms of learning. We've looked at unemployment as one of the challenges, and some businesses, if not unemployment, then maybe it's a business that has, that is struggling because of the pandemic. And we've looked at opportunities to learn and find new ways to serve the community through online platforms. And Mr. Yang Shun has shared with us what he's doing himself in terms of learning. So there's really a lot of insight that we've covered over this session. So as we sum up, I'd just like to give 30 seconds to each of our panelists to just say one last thing to the panelists. And then if there are any other questions that you have, please feel free to share with us through our social media platforms at Masaki Wellspring Hub, as well as through an email that will be shared later, and I will try and cover them as much. But 30 seconds to each one of our panelists. Just one last word on the experience and opportunities that we have based on this COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to start with Yang Shun.
Okay. Okay. So I think I stand for students. So for students, I think all of us is also facing a hard situation. We are during difficult times, and we can study face to each other. But I believe this is also an opportunity. It's a chance to improve ourselves in some skill, and also to be quiet, to get inner peace. Because young people, it's hard to get inner peace. That I really learn a lot through this virus, through the quarantine time, and especially I get a good relationship between me and God. And I think that's the best things I get from the virus. So I hope every student, every international student, whatever you are in the world, so just be safe and take this chance. Take this virus as a chance.
Really look at it as an opportunity. Thank you very much, Yang Shun. Professor David Nyanke, 30 seconds, your final comment.
Yeah, first, just to express my appreciation, for the organizers of this discussion. I think sharing experiences and lessons is very important to inspire us, especially as we are going through this crisis, to help keep our heads above water. And I would like to encourage everyone, to look at the positive side of this challenge, so that be able to overcome the situation. So stay safe and also be positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyange. Keep our heads above water. I really like that one. Dr. Erica, your final comments, just 30 seconds. Okay, we still cannot hear you, Dr. Erica. I'm not sure what happened with the sound. I believe someone may be from the organizing team rather, may look into that. In the meantime, Dr. Mpoki. Or Dr. Erica, you may type it up and I can read it out for you. In the meantime, Dr. Mpoki.
Well, like I said when I started, I'm very grateful that we've been able to meet virtually, though, better than nothing. And I want to agree with my brother Nyange. Every challenge is an opportunity. Every challenge is an opportunity. We should spend more time in thinking not of what we cannot do, but what is in our power to do under these circumstances. My brother from Abuja, Nigeria has just dropped a line on the chat box where he says, now it's time to learn, acquire new skills. It's an opportunity. These may prove to be of great use once the bay is clear. And I want to thank the Lord for the opportunity to fellowship in this way. And I pray that the COVID pandemic helps us to appreciate more of his power in our lives and in the universe than ever we've done before. And that even when it's so gloomy, Jesus is still the answer. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpoki, for really those comments that bring us to an end on a high note and really hope, because at the end of the day, we want to understand the real picture of the challenge that we have, but we need to have hope and to know what we can do about it. And I believe we've been able to achieve that in the 90 minutes that we've had together. It's been a wonderful session. Now I'm just trying to see if Dr. Erica finally she was able to type up something.
Yeah, I would like to add up.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Erica is still okay, still not able to hear, but anyway, I'd just like to say that thank you very much to our panelists for the insightful experiences, and also Dr. Erica for sharing your experience with us, and be very much.
Hear me now?
Oh yeah, now we can hear you. Awesome. Okay, 30 seconds.
You hear me?
Okay. So, yes, two things. Someone asked to me was what the saddest feeling in curing patients with COVID, and I answered that the saddest feeling for these sick and dead was their loneliness. These people died alone. Without being able to greet their family members. It was very sad, especially for the elderly and disabled people who were not even able to understand what was happening, and who all these strange people dressed as astronauts were around them. And the second thing is that tomorrow in Italy begins the third phase. And the password is don't let your guard down. What we have learned, which has now become part of us, is the importance of protecting ourselves when we visit patients where we are among us and with our family members. When we visit any patient in this period, we visit him as if he were a COVID patient. Because we are afraid. Basically, is very dangerous.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Dr. Erica. We really have to remain vigilant in these times, and I like how you brought us to that note as well. Vigilance in this time, because you never really
Fortune, from this end, I don't know.
Okay, I'm not sure who's there's some sound of any. We're running out of time, guys, but it has, I believe, been a very insightful session, as I can see from some of the feedback in the comments. And a really special thank you to our panelists, Dr. Mpoki all the way from Canada, Yang Shun all the way from China, Dr. Erica all the way from Rome in Italy, and Professor Nyange from here in Dar es Salaam. We will be, if there's any question that has not been addressed, unfortunately, we will be passing it on to panelists, and we'll be sharing the responses through our social platforms as well as through email. So I believe if you visit them in some time, you will get those responses, or you can send them to our socials at Masaki Wellspring Hub. But also, if you've left us your email address, I believe we'll be able to get in touch in that manner. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Now I'd like to hand over to Sister Rachel. I don't know if Sister Rachel is on.
Thank you, Fortune. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all our speakers, Dr. Mpoki, Dr. Erica, Professor Nyange, and Brother Yang. Thank you so much, and may God bless you for such an insightful topic discussion. We hope we'll be with you next time again. And just as closing remarks, the Word of God tells us that there's no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. Let's remember that, as Dr. Mpoki said, nothing is bigger than our Jesus, and he'll see us through this pandemic. Before COVID started, we were all busy with life issues, and we also forgot that we are blessed. And through these tough times, as it's an opportunity for us to know that we have skills to build into our self-reflections, to look inwards and also reflect and see the value of life more. But it's our chance to reconnect with others and to reconnect with ourselves and think of the mission that God has for us in this world. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, the word of God says that you should comfort each other and edify one another. But how do we do that? How do we share the message of hope during these unprecedented times? During lockdown, during quarantine, when the new normal is physical distancing, how do we become the light and share the message of hope to those who are around us, to the sick, to those who are losing loved ones? We pray that God gives us peace, that he gives us peace that surpasses all understanding, that we may become the light that keeps people strong and help them to go through this. We have a few announcements, and actually it's just one announcement. The next webinar will be in the next 2 weeks. We invite each and everyone to join, and we hope you'll also invite your friends. And as we go to say our closing prayer, I pray that God helps us and blesses each one of us as he brings us closer to him, because our God is faithful and he's greater than anything else. Let's close our eyes and pray. Almighty Father, Jesus Christ, we thank you for this opportunity that we have, Almighty Jehovah. Thank you for this discussion forum that has brought so much light, Almighty Jesus Christ. But thank you for showing us, Lord Father, and reminding us, Lord, that you are greater than all our problems. Lord Father, thank you for giving us hope and for providing us to be the hope amongst those who do not know you, Almighty Jesus Christ. May we be able to do digital ministry to those who surround us. May we be able to share your word to those who need it, Almighty Father, to the sick, to those who've lost loved ones. Lord Father, use us as instruments to be able to bring your work, to be able to do your work in this world, Almighty Jehovah. Loving Father, we thank you for the gift of life, for the gift of good health. We do not take it for granted. We are grateful because, Lord Father, it is your mercy and your unconditional love that still keeps us here today, Almighty Jesus. During this panic, when we have no one to turn to, Almighty Father, when all seems lost, Lord Jesus Christ, teach us to remain calm. Lord Jesus, you said, be still because I am God. Help us to be still and remember that you, our God, is fighting for us, Almighty Jehovah. Strengthen our hearts, Almighty Father. Strengthen our hearts that we may fear nothing. Strengthen our hearts that no disease or illness may take our faith away from you. Strengthen our hearts, Almighty Jesus Christ, as we hope for a life after Corona, Almighty Father. Loving Father, we remember all those who've lost their jobs, all those who are going through economic hardships, Almighty Jehovah. You are the great provider. May you provide for them. May you feed them and see them through this, Almighty Jesus Christ. For all the sick, we bring them to you, Almighty Jehovah. Thank you, Jesus Christ, because you are the great physician. All those who are battling COVID, all those who are battling other illnesses, all those who are battling non-communicable diseases, the blood pressure, the diabetics, Lord Father, may you be with them and keep them safe, Almighty Jesus Christ. Loving Father, as we end this session, we bring all thanksgiving and glory to you, and we praise your holy name because you are faithful, because you love us, and because you are God. Jesus Christ, we thank you and we love you. It is in your mighty name, Jesus, we pray and believe. Amen.
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 Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure, and I believe you were blessed. For our viewers and listeners, goodbye. Feel free to.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time. See you
Thank
next
you. God
time.
bless you.